Hey, thanks for meeting me here again as we continue to go through the book of Proverbs together. Proverbs chapter 28 is where we are. What is your go-to way? What is your go-to mode of operation to cover your sin? There's all sorts of things that we do to cover our sin with others as well as ourselves. With others, we might blame shift. We might blame someone else for our shortcomings. We might blame someone else for our immorality or whatever it may be. So we might blame other people. We might rationalize our sin. We might seek to justify with other people why we do what we do, even though it might not be pleasing to the Lord. And so we rationalize. That's just the way we are, and that's just what I needed to do. And we make all sorts of excuses. Sometimes we just straight up tell people to mind their own business and don't judge me. And so there's all sorts of ways that we try to conceal our sins with other people. And we do it with ourselves as well. We try to justify our sins in our own heart. Perhaps we try to justify ourselves by trying to convince ourselves that the good we do outweighs the bad, and so therefore this particular thing that I just did is really not that bad in the grand scheme of things. Perhaps we try to numb ourselves, whether through addiction to various things, whatever that might look like. Numb ourselves to try to just not think about our sin. Perhaps we try to self-promote. We try to become workaholics so people will think highly of us. We maybe obsess over our body image because we want people to think highly of us. All that to say, deep down, we know that we are flawed. We know that we are sinful. So we either try to cover it up, try to earn people's approval in all sorts of ways. It gets complicated, doesn't it? We go through all of these hoops and all of these complicated antics to cover our sin. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 28:13 that's not wise. That's not what a wise person does. This is not how you dwell securely. This is not how you're at ease and live a life that doesn't dread disaster. This is not the way of prospering. This is detrimental to you. Listen to what it says. Whoever conceals his transgressions will not prosper, but he who confesses and forsakes them will obtain mercy. Whatever you go through to try to conceal your transgressions is keeping you from prospering. And let me tell you two things about concealing your sin. One, it's pointless because the Bible tells us that God knows us to our depths, that nothing is hidden from him, that he will expose everything in us and we are accountable to him. So it's pointless. Number two, it's destructive. When we cover sin, it tends to fester, and we either cover it with more sin or that particular sin becomes more and more of a problem in our life as it just spirals out of control. So it's pointless and it's destructive. And that's why the Bible tells us that whoever conceals their sin will not prosper. But there's a second part to that verse. It says, but whoever confesses and forsakes their transgressions will obtain mercy. The Bible promises that if we confess our sin, he is faithful and just to forgive our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So what are we learning? We're learning and seeing that the way of wisdom is a person who is honest with ourselves, a person who is honest with God, who confesses their sin before God. Because if we try to cover our sin by ourselves, God will expose that. But if we expose our sin to him, if we confess our sin to him, he'll cover it with mercy. That's what's waiting for you. Cast your cares upon him. Cast your anxieties. Cast your sin upon him, for he died for them. The shame and reproach no longer have to be above your head because they were nailed to the cross of Christ. Whoever confesses their sin, and here's the second part, forsake it. Leave it behind. Don't be like a dog returning to its vomit. Leave it behind. That's the wise way to live. So, how are you trying to cover your sin? Why don't you cast it upon Christ? For he covers it in his grace. He covers it in his mercy. He covers it in his blood. He who confesses and forsakes his transgression will obtain mercy.